What is up, everyone? I'm Rusty, your local laboratory maniac, and this is Labman EDH. Over the last 4 months, I've dropped 22 videos of some of the jankiest, most unique EDH decks you've ever seen, and I have plenty more to come. But today, we're speed running through 45 of them. If you're new here, this is your chance to catch up and discover a bunch of wild new ideas in just one video, and maybe you'll find your next commander deck. And for my regulars, don't worry, we have 5 brand new decks in here just for you, so keep your eye out. I'll keep everything super brief for this deck video, but if something catches your eye, just drop a comment down below. I'll point you to the full original breakdown video or hook you up with a deck list. Now remember, deck lists are just guides. The real magic happens when you alter and season the deck to your playstyle. All right, let's not waste any more time. Let's just jump right into it. This deck is called the Sunrise over Trocare. It's a Boros land sacrifice deck. It's centered around the flagstones of Trocare, which is a legendary land that taps for a white. However, if it goes to the graveyard, you get to search a library for any planes, put it on the battlefield tapped. Then you can use stuff like Second Sunrise to bring it back and do it all over. Second Sunrise is a 3 mana white instant that returns all artifacts, creatures, enchantments, and lands that were put there from the graveyard to the play this turn. Now, Quintorius would be a great commander for this deck. It is a 5 mana Boros legendary creature. It gives all spirits +1/+0. Then, whenever a card leaves your graveyard, create a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token. So that's pretty good. It'll be a 4/2 if he's out. So every time you're bringing back your Flatstones, you're sacrificing it and bringing it back, mana ramping, you're getting an army of spirits. It's just a really fun, interesting way to go with Boros. Boros is usually artifacts or soldiers. Quick lore tidbit: Trocare is a location in the nation of Acantia, and it's on the plain of Dominaria. It was a city utterly destroyed by hordes of orcs and goblins. It was a nation of highly religious humans aligned with white mana. Multiple cards represent its fall, like the ruins of Trocare, the Shades of Trocare, and the Flagstones of Trocare. The Flagstones have been said to be up for millennia. This next deck is You Can Counter on Me, okay? I want my stuff to be countered. Do you face blue decks that are constantly using an offer you can't refuse or something? It's so annoying. However, this deck wants that. Go ahead, counter me. I dare you. It uses Guile, which is a 6 mana blue creature, elemental incarnation. It's a 6/6. But its most important ability says when something you control is countered, you exile it and you can cast it from exile for free. Now, this actually goes infinite, and it goes infinite with Vexing Bobble effects. There's a couple of them, and then a cast trigger effect, and then a repeatable count. Well, you need at least one counter spell. We'll get into that here in a second. So basically, the way it goes is you have Guile on the field. You play something like Ulamog that destroys something when it's cast. You get that cast trigger that goes on the stack that resolves, but then you play something. There's a lot of creatures that tap just to counter a spell, or like they'll usually say counter target spell unless its controller pays one. You're not going to pay the one. You're going to let it go to exile, and then with Guile's ability, you get to cast it for free. But Vexing Bobble is an artifact that says whenever a player casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter it. Okay, so it gets countered. Okay, sweet. I get the cast trigger again. It goes back to exile. I cast it for free again because Guile is still out. So when it got countered, it went to exile. And we keep doing that. Destroy all the permanents you want. Bang, bada, boom. You'll never get to play that Ulamog again unless you get rid of Vexing Bobble. But still, it's a really interesting way to build a deck. I've never seen anyone do it. I think I had Momar Vig as the commander, which is a Simic color commander that lets you tutor for Guile. So that's a really good, and you're going to want a mana ramp anyway, so having green in there is great. This next deck is a Boros Theft deck, and I actually built it around Zidaine. I call it Steal from the Rich, Sell to the Rich. Now, he is a 5 mana Boros legendary creature. When he ETBs, you gain control of target creature an opponent controls until end of turn. Untap it, it gains lifelink and haste until end of turn. Whenever an opponent gains control of a permanent from you, you create a treasure token. It's a 3/3. So there's a couple ways you can go about this guy. One way is, and one way I don't see people doing it, is a donate strategy, because when an opponent gains control of a permanent from you, that could be either you steal it and have to give it back, or you just donate it and make treasures. That's a kind of cool way to go about it. A lot of people are going the blink route. Now, a blink is a good strategy for this, especially blink that exiles a creature and returns it under your control and not the owner's control. For example, Cloud Shift is a 1 mana white instant. Exile target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under your control. That's really good value because most theft cards are 3 mana red sorceries. So 1 mana instant is just amazing for you. Now, the main way I went with this deck, because people are doing the blink a lot, I did some blink in it, but I did the phasing. Now, phasing is an interesting way to do it. It kind of delays the return of the thing you steal. So let's say you steal your opponent's blight steal and then you phase it out. When it's phased out, the opponent actually gets it back at the end step. So they gain control of it at the end step, but it's still phased out. It will not phase in until your untap step. So it'll phase in back under their control, of course. So you steal their blight steal, phase it out. During their turn, they don't get it. During your turn, they get it back, then you steal it again. So you almost are like constantly delaying. They never get to use it unless it has unless you steal something with an activated ability. But if it's like a blight seal, they'll never attack anyone with it. You can also go the aristocrats route. So basically, everything you steal, you just sacrifice and you get value from it. Those are probably, what was that, 4 different ways you can build Zidaine.
Now, this one's called Emrakul's Sock Puppet. However, Emrakul's just in the 99. It's not the actual commander. Now, let's say, let me just put this out there. This is 100% the meanest deck on this list. If that's your thing, that's cool. I see you. You're a sadistic planeswalker. We love all kinds here at Labman EDH, all kinds of planeswalkers, okay? So, Emrakul, when you cast it, the Promise In, it's a 13 mana legendary creature. It has a cost reduction ability, of course. However, the most important part is when you cast it, you gain control of target opponents during their turn, and then they get an additional turn after that. Then it has Flying Trample, Protect from Incense. It's a 13/13. Pretty powerful creature. But, them getting an extra turn won't really matter. You could obviously play stuff like Ugin's Nexus. You can play stuff like Gerard's Hourglass Pendant that prevents extra turns. Or you can play stuff like Volrath's Dungeon, Lethal Vapors. They are enchantments. They're both 4 mana black enchantments, actually, that any player can activate the ability. And usually that's bad. That's bad. So for Volrath's Dungeon, for example, any player may pay 5 life during his or her turn to destroy Volrath's Dungeon. Choose and discard a card. Target player chooses a card in his or her hand and puts that card on top of his library. Play this only as a sorcery. So it's really cool for you if you want to discard stuff to take out your opponent's hand. Sure, but that's not what we want. We want that first ability. We're going to force our opponents to pay that because we control their turn. Pay that until they have 0 life if you can. But sometimes maybe they'll be left with 4 life. You can't actually pay life they don't have. So you won't always be able to get them down to 0. And then what are we going to do? Yeah, that kills that opponent, but the other opponents are going to be super sketch. We're going to play Shinryu Transcendent Rival. When it transforms, you choose an opponent, and when that opponent loses the game, you win the game, and it's an 8/8. So basically, you're going to want to choose one opponent with your commander, then gain control of that opponent's turn, then use something like Volrath's Dungeon. That way, you automatically win the game by taking out one player. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but when the Gatewatch performed the ritual to trap Emrakul in the moon on Innistrad, she willingly lets herself get sealed in it. Now, she possesses Tamiyo, and has her read a scroll she has vowed to never read after telling Jace, I just no longer want to play. And there should be blossoms, not barren resentment. The soil is not receptive. It is not my time, not yet. And then she gets sealed away in the moon. This is perfect lore because her card always, it will gain control of a player and make them do something. That's what she did in lore. And honestly, they have not revealed what she meant by there should be blossoms, not barren resentment. It makes me think that she's been corrupted somehow and that the Eldrazi are supposed to bring life and be life bringers instead of life destroyers, but who knows?
This next deck is the Real Estate Agent deck. Now, it's built around Stillskin Moogle Merchant. He's a 1 mana white legendary creature Moogle with lifelink, and you pay to tap him. Target creature gains control of another target permanent you control, and if you do, you draw the card. It's a 1/2. Now, most people will go the bad gift route, giving things people don't like in order to kind of hamper their plans. We're not most people, okay? We're going to be donating our planes and our lands, which I'll admit isn't really an archetype, but it is now. We're going to perfect it. Okay, so why donate planes? White does a lot of good catch up ramp, so that's one benefit. Another one is politics. If that's not your thing, that's totally cool. But if someone's the arch enemy, we can work with our other people and say, hey, you know what? Here's a land to help you out. Just don't swing at me, stuff like that. Another benefit is we can use cards that give things planeswalk, and that way we can't be blocked. That'll help us close out games later on. You got Ace and Highway. It's a 6 mana enchantment. It says all white creatures gain planeswalk, and that'll also help your opponent's stuff too. If you're going to be playing politics, that could be beneficial. Now, to take out the final opponent with ease, you want to build your deck so you're ready to take them on. You might want to play cards that are good against a certain play style or a color pairing. Maybe play a lot of cards that have protection from a specific color. The sky's the limit. So you can boost that person, make sure that they beat the other two opponents, and then you can easily take them out. And that's essentially the deck. Donating lands. I kind of like this deck. It's one of my most viewed on Moxfield, ironically enough. This next deck is my Flag Bearer deck. Now, this is probably one of my more janky, weird decks. It's actually also a Sliver deck. Okay, I know that's a lot. That's a lot. Now, the way I go about building decks is if I get a cool idea I want to work with, I end up making 5 to 10 different versions of the deck on tapped out, play test it, do some gold fishing with it and do all that stuff. Now, Flag Bearer is a creature type, but it's also there's only 2 creatures with the type, and there's also an aura that gives something that type. And basically, they have to be targeted if they're a legal target. So this whole deck wants you to be targeted by your opponent. Now, how is that going to benefit us? Isn't that a bad thing? Well, Opaline Sliver is one card that made me actually go towards the Sliver route. It is a 3 mana Azorius creature. All slivers have, whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell an opponent controls, you may draw a card into 2/2. Well, that's obviously just like all sliver abilities, is a copy of another ability. Now, in this deck, there's less than 10 slivers in the deck. All 5 color slivers, plus like 3 or 4 regular slivers like Opaline Sliver. I know I have the 2 mana slivers in there, and I have Diffusion Sliver, which makes counters a spell if it targets one of your creatures unless they play 3. So it's kind of like Ward. Now, if you don't want to go the Sliver route, that's totally cool. You got Stormvold Frost Giant Jarl. He's a 7 mana Bant legendary creature giant. He has Ward 3, and he gives all your other creatures Ward 3, and that's the most important ability right there. He's a 7/7. He can make things 7/7s or 1/1s, but really it's that creatures you control have Ward. Now, what if our opponents aren't playing stuff that target our things? We have redirect spells to redirect things to our creatures. We have obviously the flag bearers that redirect as well. You also can give your opponent spells by casting stuff with demonstrate. There's a chain of series, like Chain of Vapors, for example, where it lets your opponent gain control of that spell and copy it. So there's a lot of cool options, and there's a lot of creatures that care about being targeted. Dragons also do it a lot, so you could actually go a dragon route. I put Morophon, the 7 mana changeling, as my Sliver commander because it reduces all my 5 colors to 0. Because that's why I play all the 5 colors. And I just wanted a deck that put all those in. Slivers are obviously targeted a lot, but that's essentially the gist of the deck. You want to be targeted. You give your opponent stuff to target. If they're not doing that, you redirect it. And then give your stuff ward so it counters it, so you keep your stuff. There's just so many cool ways to go about this kind of deck. This next deck is called Living Essence. It's based around the secret commander Essence of the Wild. He is a 6 mana green creature. He makes creatures enter as copies of him, and he's a 6/6. The only creatures you control. It would actually be really powerful if it made your opponents. That'd be a really cool card if it made their creatures enter as 6/6s as well. Now, basically, the idea of this deck is to use Living Weapon, Job Select, and 4 Mirrodin equipments. And they're going to be making more because equipping and paying equipment cost is too slow nowadays for Magic. They don't do it. So they'll give you a creature automatically equipped. That's essentially why they're doing it. Now, if you play a living weapon, for example, it comes in with a 0/0 germ with the equipment equipped to it. But if you have Essence of the Wild out, it's a 6/6 Essence of the Wild equipped with the equipment. Chishiro is a great commander for this, the Shattered Blade. He is a 4 mana Gruul legendary creature, Snake Samurai. When an aura or equipment enters the battlefield under your control, you create a 2/2 red spirit creature token with menace. At the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each modified creature you control, and he's a 4/4. So you want to play your commander first, and then that's why it's a double-edged sword, because for tokens, it's amazing. Essence of the Wild, you want them to be that. But if you're playing Essence of the Wild, you need to set up your board first and then play it because your commander will come in as an Essence of the Wild. So, got to keep that in mind. Got to play smart. Now, every time you play an equipment, you get essentially 2 Essence of the Wild if your commander is out. So, it's just a neat little trick. And Essence of the Wild, there's a lot of cool build arounds that you could do. So, play around with it if you'd like.
Chishiro is a large Orochi samurai from modern Kamigawa. If you don't know, Orochi are snake like people. On original Kamigawa, at least, they were all redheads for some reason. I don't know why. And the women had mammary glands. Why would a snake need Did they drink milk? Are these snakes drinking milk? I don't. Anyway, okay. I digress. He carries a black blade flecked with jade that represents his bond with his kami companion, Kama. Now, Kama, the kami of Forest and Fellowship, is a kami from the plane of Kamigawa, of course, who takes the massive form of a boar with bear claws. Now, being the spirit of Forest Fellowship, it just sounds so nice. This guy sounds like a chill boar. This next deck is called Flooding the Board. It is something I've been obsessed with recently. I've built like 5 or 6 decks with it. Now, the Flood of Mars is a 4 mana alien zombie horror. As Island Walk, and when it attacks, you can put a flood counter on a land or creature. If you do it on a creature, they become copies of the Flood of Mars. If you put it on a land, it becomes an island. Cool thing about him is even if they remove the counter, it's still a Flood of Mars. The flood counter is only a reminder. It's not what's making the thing the thing. Now, if it does change a land, it is an island in addition to its other types, so you can't shut off someone's mana. Now, you want to attack with this guy, turning all your opponent's creatures into flood. Then their floods will attack and turn things into other floods. You'll flood the board, so to speak. Now, the best commander I had for this is Helga. It is a 3 mana Bant legendary creature, Frog Druid. Now, whenever you cast a spell, creature spell with 4 CMC, you draw the card and put a counter on him, and then you can tap it for mana. Now, it's great value. It's a draw engine and taps for mana. You're going to want to put things that goad creatures so your opponents have to attack. There's some same name cards that you've seen in various Relentless Rat decks or something like that that you can throw in here because he's actually turning things into the Flood of Mars, so they will have the same name. It's just such a cool strategy. You can do stuff that gives you protection from blue. You can do stuff that's zombie support. You can do so many cool things with this deck. Now, the reason why Bant is the best is because you want to give your stuff hexproof. So you can. There's 1,000 ways to do that in red, in white and green. So just keep that in mind. You can totally do that. Your lands, you don't care if they change, but keep in mind he has Island Walk, and so will your opponent. So boosting this guy so you can outrace your opponent will also be pretty important. The Flood of Mars is a water based virus. It was frozen in a glacier on Mars. It was eventually released. It would cause the affected to produce infected water that they would kind of pour out their mouth or any kind of hole, almost like they use the hydro pump ability of a Pokemon. Their former personalities are gone, just like most zombie viruses, replaced with the need to spread the virus. They were about to escape on a ship, but were stopped by the doctor. This next deck is called the Rule of Three. It was actually inspired by a card I used back in the day. Plus, I saw a video from Underplayed MTG. He was talking about a Galadriel deck that was like a devoid deck. And that was like the first time I really looked at Galadriel in this way. I was like, oh, wait, I used to play a card that would make 3 tokens. I think it was called Thatcher's Revolt back in Standard. How many kinds of cards make 3 tokens? Because if you made 3 tokens all at once, Galadriel's abilities would all activate. Now, Galadriel is a 5 mana Bant commander. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you choose one of her abilities that hasn't been chosen yet. You add 3 green, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, or you scry 2, then draw the card and choose a 3/3. So I wanted to just see if there was a way I can, because I think Thatcher's Revolt was like only 3 or 4 mana, but I want to get it in this color. Thatcher's Revolt is a red card. So I just went to Scryfall. I put in 3 tokens in the text box, and man, there's like 70 or 80 in this color pairing. One that came out recently that you may have cracked in a pack is Arnith Rescue Mission. It's a 4 mana white sorcery. You choose one, you either create 3/1/1 colorless hero creature tokens, or you tap three up to 3 target creatures, put stun counters on one of them. Now, we're obviously going to be doing the tokens. So basically, for 4 mana, you make 3 tokens, you get 3 green mana, you can put a +1/+1 counter on all creatures you control, and then you scry 2 and draw the card, all for 4 mana if you have Galadriel out. So I just thought that was insane amounts of value. And of course, if you built a deck like this, you might want token doublers, you might want overrun effects. I mean, there's a lot of different options that you can take, but that's the core key concept of the deck. Try to get Galadriel's abilities all to trigger with one spell. This next deck is a lore based deck around Dragonstorm. Now, if you don't know this, on Tarkir, they just resolved the issue of the Dragonstorms. Basically, dragons come in every which way. It's a storm of dragons, literally. And so is this deck. Now, there are actually 2 other cards. One's a creature, one's a sorcery that are related to dragons, and they have the storm ability, so you can throw those in here, of course. But Dragonstorm is a 9 mana sorcery with storm, and it says you may search your library for a dragon permanent and put it into play. And then if you get a chance to copy this 3 or 4 times with that storm ability, you basically win the game. We've all died to ETB damage from dragons. I know you have. Don't even lie. Don't even pretend. Now, you can choose different commanders depending on your play style. You got Samut, the driving force. It is a 6 mana Naya, legendary creature, human warrior cleric. Has first strike, vigilance, and haste. And start your engine. And then other creatures you control get +X/+0, where X is your speed. And then non-creature spells you cast cost X less to cast, where X is your speed. and it's a 4/5. So it's a cost reduction, help reduce that 9 mana costing Dragonstorm. Or you can do Miram Sentinel Worm. It is a 6 mana Temur legendary creature, Dragon Spirit, has flying, War 2, and then whenever a non-token dragon enters the battlefield under your control, you create a token that's a copy of it, except it's not legendary if it is a legendary, and it's a 6/6. So this actually just speeds up your how many you need to win the game, essentially, because it will make copies of anything you get with Dragonstorm. Either way you go, it'll be really fun, a real achievement unlock situation to get Dragonstorm off. This next deck is called You Can't Touch This, and I got it from seeing so many cards that say you have hexproof. And then I thought to myself, what could we do with that? After some contemplation, I figured out I'm going to use the 12th Doctor. He is a 5 mana Izzet legendary creature, Time Lord Doctor. He says, whenever you cast a spell, your first spell from anywhere other than your hand, you give it Demonstrate. Now, Demonstrate's an interesting ability because that means you get to copy whatever you cast, but so does one of your opponents. So, if I'm casting stuff that targets players and my opponent has to target a player, but they can't target me because I have hexproof, like Aegis of the God is a creature that gives us hexproof, or something like Absolute Virtue, which you may have pulled in a pack. It's an 8 mana Azorius legendary creature, Avatar Warrior. It can't be countered, has flying, and gives you protection from your opponents, and is an 8/8. So that's essentially what you want to do. And now there's 3 paths that at least I took anyway that you can take this deck in. And those 3 paths you can go down are burn, mill, or curses. There's probably others, but these are the ones I chose for this deck. So whichever fits your playstyle. There are a lot of burn spells that are pretty big that you can cast from the top of your library or from exile that target a player. For example, Flame Wave is a 7 mana sorcery. It deals 4 damage to target player in each creature he or she controls. So if you cast this, you can essentially board wipe opponents and do burn damage to them. Or you can do stuff like cut your losses. It is a mill strategy that targets players. There's also Traumatize. It's a 6 mana blue sorcery that says target player mills half their library, rounded down. Now, if you're demonstrating this, so you get to choose 2 players, and then your opponent gets to choose one, of course. And then you got curses. There's a lot of good curses in this color. You know, curses normally are associated with black, so you're definitely going outside the box with this deck if you go curses. Overwhelming Splendor is the best example of this. It's an 8 mana curse. You enchant a player, all creatures they control become 1/1 with no abilities, and enchanted player can't activate abilities that aren't mana abilities or loyalty abilities. And so you can go either of these ways, or you can mix them all together, and maybe some mill, maybe some burn, maybe some curses, and then that will make a very interesting deck. This next deck is called the Random Yeti Spaghetti Monster. It's about my boy Umaro, Raging Yeti. He's a 6 mana legendary creature, Yeti Berserker. Now, I fell in love with this guy as soon as he was spoiled. I love random effects. I know some people don't, but I do. You randomly select one of 3 of his abilities during combat. You either give all creatures you control +3/+0 and trample, you discard your hand, draw 4, or he deals 5 damage to any target. He himself also has trample, and he's a 6/6. Now, randomness can suck. It's not always great. It's not competitive, but being competitive is not always what you want to do. Now, because maybe you want to do damage at one point. Maybe you want to boost your creatures. Maybe you want to draw. It's to minimize this. I actually made this an extra combat step kind of deck. So World at War, for example, gives you an extra combat and has rebound. There's a bunch in red. Red's the main color to do that. And why do that? Because his ability, Umar's ability, triggers at the beginning of combat on your turn. So it's not once a turn, it's every combat. So if you have more, you get to choose more. Maybe you get that +3/+3 3 times. Now everything is +9/+9. Who knows what can happen. And that's the cool thing about randomness. This next deck I call my Chicken Dino Nuggie deck. It's around displaced dinosaurs. It's a 7 mana creature, dinosaur, of course. Historic permanents you control enter as 7/7 dinosaurs. in addition to their other types, so they are creatures, and it's a 7/7. The actual commander's Yagra, Eater of All. He is a 5-mana Golgari legendary creature, elemental cat. He has ward, they have to sacrifice a food. He makes all other creatures food artifacts in addition to their other types. And it says whenever a food is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you put 2+1/+1 counters on it. It's a 6/6. Now, this is pretty cool because it makes all your creatures, no matter what, even if it's an Elvish Mystic, come into play as 7/7 dinos in addition to their other types. So, and they're also going to be foods. So you're going to have a bunch of dinosaur chicken nuggies. You can even make a proxy. I made a little proxy food chicken nugget token. It was pretty cool. Now, Yagra has a lot of combo potential if you are into that kind of thing. A lot of infinite combos. Just go check out EDH Rec. There's a bunch of them out there. This is kind of a silly, fun deck. Displaced Dinosaurs is just a fun secret commander to work around. He'd make a good super friends because he'd make your planeswalkers 7/7 creatures. You can play a whole bunch with it, but I went the Dino Chicken Nugget route because of our commander. He makes all creatures food. Now, Yigra is known as a calamity beast. They are Bloomburrow's equivalent to natural disasters. She is a large cougar, and when she comes, it's known as the season of salt. She's also called the drought cat. Her coming is not only dangerous because she attacks people, she also affects their crops, their livestock, etc.
This next deck is more of a concept right now than an actual fleshed out deck list. So if you build this, let me know. I'd love to see what you build. Now, it's based around the idea of tapping X creatures of a certain type to get some kind of benefit. Captivating Vampires, a 3-mana black vampire creature. Other vampires you control get +1/+1, and then you tap 5 untapped vampires you control, gain control of target creature, it becomes a vampire in addition to its other types. Skirk Fire Marshal has protection from red. It is a 5-mana red creature goblin. You tap 5 goblins to do 10 damage to each creature and each player, and it's a 2/2. So it won't actually do damage to itself because it has protection from red. And what else are you doing in this deck? I mean, that alone, there's so many cool effects. There's a cleric one that gains you life. There's a druid one that steals lands. There's soldiers that destroy things. So there's a lot of cool abilities that do this. Now, for the deck, you might want to throw in Maxwood Nexus or Mirror Entity or that one Sliver commander that can change creature types. You want to play those kinds of things so all your creatures can tap. So every ability just essentially says tap 5 creatures you control and then do X, Y, Z. And then you can throw in some Seedborn Muse or something like that. You can destroy the board, you can steal the board, you can do so many cool things with a deck like this.
For this next deck, you've probably seen in previous videos I've mentioned Fog. I just love Fogs. Yes, I know Settle the Wreckage is better. Yes, I know Etherize is better. However, we love what we love and we yam what we yam, okay? We don't want to do a regular Fog deck. You probably know green and white are the Fog colors, sometimes black with like darkness or something. But there are other ways in blue or red, or you can combine it for Izzet for an Izzet Fog deck. When's the last time you saw that? Never. You never seen that. Now, you could go the Telekinesis, you can go Glacial Crevices. So, Telekinesis is a 2 blue instant. Target creature deals no damage this combat on this turn. Creature becomes tapped, and you may not untap it during the next 2 untap steps. And then you got Glacial Crevices. It's a 3-mana red enchantment. You sacrifice a Snow Mountain to prevent all combat damage that will be dealt this turn. Or, and I'll be honest, there are a lot of options in colorless. You got Scarecrow. It's a 5-mana artifact creature. You pay 6, tap it until end of turn. All damage done to you by flying creatures is reduced by 0, and it's a 2/2. There is a carpet that does the exact same thing, but for non-flyers. So there's many options you can go. You'll really surprise your opponent with this. Whatever commander, I'm not sure what commander would be best for this deck. If you have any suggestions, comment down below.
This next deck is started from the bottom, now we here. It's have you probably have heard of top deck manipulation, which is a great strategy. But what about bottom deck manipulation? I'm using Mind Flayer the Shadow, but it is a Universe Beyond card. So if you want to use the in-universe, it'd be Arvinox the Mind Flail. It is actually was just reprinted in Duskmoor, so it's probably pretty cheap. It's a 7 mana black legendary enchantment creature horror. He isn't a creature unless you control 3 or more permanents you don't own. And at the beginning of your end step, you exile the bottom card of each opponent's library face down. For as long as those cards remain exiled, you may look at them and you may cast permanent spells from among them, and you may spend mana as though it were any color to cast those spells. And he's a 9/9. So he's huge. Now there are a lot of cards that put cards from the graveyard to the bottom of the library. For example, you got Junk Troller. It's a 4 mana artifact creature golem. As defender, you can tap it, put target card from a graveyard on the bottom of its owner's library, and it's a 0/6. Now, this strategy is cool because we can manipulate the bottom of our opponent's library so we get what we want. Also, it's just inherently good against graveyard strategies. So if you're facing a lot of graveyard strategies, this could just you could just and you would be surprised how many cards do this. I think I looked and there's over like 10 or 15 cards. They seem to print it all the time. I don't know why. Maybe they're Grinzo fans. Who knows? Who knows? So, how are we getting things into our opponent's graveyard? Well, mill. Black obviously mills itself pretty well, but it has options to mill your opponents. There's a lot of artifacts that also mill your opponents. And by the time you get your commander out, because he's 7 mana, things probably are already in the graveyard. Play some board wipes, play removal, so you can target things that you want to steal from your opponents. It's just a really cool strategy.
Quick lore tidbit about Arvinox. He appears as a creature composed of black mist in the shape of a worm with a large maw full of teeth. It appears larger than a house and causes a lot of destruction in its wake. It's from the plane of Innistrad, which is pretty cool. Now, another fun fact that I guess technically isn't lore is this was actually the first in universe version of a secret layer card printed in a deck. It was printed in one of the Miracle Dustmore deck. This next deck is called No Graveyard for You. For a while, I built a few Exile Tribal decks. They are decks that exile graveyards and benefit from that, or benefit from your opponent having no graveyard. Arthur of Shadows is one of those cards. It exiles all cards from all opponents' graveyards, and then you can choose one of them and then cast it for any mana type. You want to play stuff like Leyline of the Void and Bajuka Bog. There are also options. Then you want to play cards that benefit you when you have more cards in your graveyard than your opponent. For example, Mist of Stagnation is a really mean blue enchantment that says each player can only untap permanents at their upkeep equal to the number of cards in their graveyard. If your opponent has none, they don't untap. You can actually do a commander that mills you. That's what I ended up doing for this deck. But you can also do Umbrus, which gets boosted for each exiled card. He will exile a lot of cards too. He has an ETB that exiles cards from your opponent's library. So there's many ways you can go. Definitely black, blue, Dimir, at least at the minimum that color pairing in this deck. But you can add colors depending on what cards you find. But you just want and in this deck, I will say has a lot of older cards that don't see any play. When's the last time you saw Mist of Stagnation, for example? There's just so many cool cards you can put in a deck like this.
This next deck is my fire breathing deck. There's actually a couple ways you can go about building this deck. Now, fire breathing is a thing I love to play around with. I built like 3 decks with it. Basically, what it is the ability to pay mana to temporarily boost a creature. Now, what can you do with this? Well, there are a bunch of commanders. BV is one that you could build around. It's a 3 mana Izzet one. It's a legendary creature wizard. Essentially, you pay 0 to add X mana of any combination of blue or red, where X is VV's power. Activate only during your turn and only once each turn. And then whenever you cast a non creature spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on BV and do 1 damage to each opponent. It's a 0/3. So, what are you going to do with this? You can play things like the card Fire Breathing, which they made later on. It is a 1 mana enchantment. enchant creature, you pay a red to boost it +1/+0 until end of turn. So you can essentially put Fire Breathing on Vivi. Let's say you pay 5 mana into Fire Breathing, boosting Vivi by 5. Then you pay its 0 ability, essentially getting all that mana back because their ability gives them mana. And then you put that all into Fire Breathing again. So for 5 mana, you're boosting them by 10. And it is an enchantment. So, of course, it's a non creature spell. So that also boosts it. So that's a really cool way of doing it. Zerta, the Dawn Waker, is another way. It's a 3 mana Boros. It's a legendary creature, Elemental Fox. It has Companion. I put it as the commander, but you can do its companion if you want. Its companion restriction is each permanent card in your starting deck has an activated ability. And what he does essentially is cost all your activated abilities cost 2 generic less to activate. And you can pay 1, tap them. Target creature can't block this turn. It's a 3/3. So a lot of fire breathing abilities cost more than 1. So this is a way to reduce them all to 1. A lot of them that cost more than 1, though, kind of boost more than, like, I think there's one that gives all creatures you control +1/+0 and trample for 3 mana. So this would just make it 1 mana. You can also do the new firebending ability that's coming out, like Zuko. He does well with this, kind of like Vivi. Basically, he will add mana equal to its power that you could just go into fire breathing with, just like Vivi. It's like you're recycling. So you pay 5 for the firebending ability with Zuko, which will increase his power by 5. Then he attacks, producing 5 more mana. And before combat damage is dealt, just boost him another 5. That's a really cool way to go about it. On the plane of Ikoria, legend says that the sun resides in Rogren. The planeswalker Vivian Reed expected to find a monster of immense power and heat. Instead, she found Zerda, a creature of immeasurable beauty. Vivian approached it and it let her pet it, which is kind of a weird thing to include in the lore. And she said it felt like the warmth of a perfect sunbeam. This was just a wholesome story. With War of the Spark, people dying left and right, blah blah blah. And then you got Vivian just petting a fox. It's it's pretty wholesome there. This next deck is a lore based deck around Rabia, the plane from Arabian Nights. I did a whole lore video about it. There should be like something popping up on the screen if you want to check out that lore video. Rabia was a plane filled with deserts. Deserts usually do damage. Abraded Bluffs, for example, does damage when it ETBs. Now, how will we be building around that ability to maximize it? Well, other permanents with landfall abilities that do damage will be great, like Tannuk, Memorial Ensign. Maybe that's a card you got in a pack recently. He's a 3 mana Gruul legendary creature, Kavu pilot. He has a landfall ability that says whenever a land enters, he does 1 damage to each opponent. And then, if this is the second time this ability has resolved this turn, you draw a card. And there are so many cool cards with that. I think in my original video, I made I put like 10 on the screen, and that wasn't even all of them. There's even black cards that do it. It's kind of insane.
For our commander, I chose the Wandering Minstrel due to his ability to have lands come in untapped. And he is a 5 color commander, even though he's only Simic in his cost. He has all 5. He has Wooburg in his tech, so he counts as all 5 colors. And so you're going to have at least 11 deserts that ETB and do damage. Now, one other strategy that you can benefit is bounce lands. Bounce lands will bring abraded bluffs back to your hands, for example, and then play a lot of playing additional land cards so you can just put it right back into play, doing more damage. You can also do a sacrifice land theme, and then return it with like second sunrise abilities that we discussed in the first deck of this video. There's a lot of cool strategies you can go to deal damage to make your opponents die from deserts. Another fun land deck is a mono blue land deck. You do not see that often, okay? Sometimes, most of the time you see Simic, but you never see blue. Now, Gogo, Master of Mimicry, is a 3 mana blue legendary creature. You pay X and X to tap it, copy target activated or triggered ability. You control X times. You may choose new targets for the copies. This ability can't be copied, and X can't be 0. Now, it's a 2/4. So basically, what's the strategy of this deck? It's playing fetch lands. Either the Zendikar fetch lands if you got some extra ones lying around that get islands, or, evolving wild, stuff like that. There's a bunch now that do that. So this could be a very budget deck. So basically, you act. Let's say I'm going to set up the field for you. You got Gogo out, and you got 6 mana out. You play a Polluted Delta. You crack it. Activated ability goes on the stack. You use Gogo to tap it. Tap 6 mana, so X is 3. Copy it 3 times. Then you get 4 lands. Now you have 10 lands. You untap the next turn. You play your Evolving Wilds. You tap the Evolving Wilds, search for a basic. While that's on the stack, you copy it, pay your 10 mana, copy it 5 times. That way you're getting 6. Now you have 16 lands, and it just goes on and on. So what are you doing with all that mana in mono blue? Well, really the strategy at that point is up to you. Do you want to play X spells, like draw X spells to draw a bunch, make your opponent draw a bunch, make a mill? Do you want to play big beaters like Hullbreaker Horror? Do you want to play Leviathan, Krakens? What do you want to do? That's totally up to you. But the main idea is using fetch lands, copying the activated ability of the fetch lands with Gogo. This deck is called Decipher My Fist. It's a deck based around the ability Cipher. Now, when you cast a Cipher spell, you exile it, encode it onto a creature you control, and then whenever that creature deals combat damage, you can cast the spell without paying its mana cost. So you get to reuse your instants and sorceries. All Cipher abilities are in Dimir colors, so I'm using Grima, Saruman's Footman, which is a 4-mana Dimir legendary creature, human advisor. He can't be blocked, and when he deals damage to your opponent, they exile cards from the top of their library until they do an instant or sorcery, and then we get to cast that instant or sorcery for free. So we're getting such great value. If he has Cipher abilities on him, he gets his own ability plus any Cipher. So one attack from him can trigger 2, 3, 4 abilities depending on what you get. Now, as the kids say, it's very Dimir, but we're going to be saying it's very Dimir, very cutesy. This deck is great. This next deck is called my Feign Death deck. Now, Feign Death effects are effects that return a creature to the battlefield after they die. Well, this allows black to have an effective blinking archetype. When I was designing this deck, I wanted essentially to put as many Feign Deaths in so I can do a lot of ETB abilities. And you could also do a lot of death triggers because black, what they essentially will do is sacrifice that creature, and then the Feign Death ability will be bringing it back. So it's almost like a blinking strategy, which is pretty cool. Now, for a commander, Ayara is the best. She is a 3-mana black legendary creature, Elf Noble. When she or another black creature enters the battlefield under your control, you drain and gain your opponents. And then you can tap her, sacrifice another black creature to draw a card. So she's sacrificing, which is what we want, then play Feign Death, and then she replaces the card, essentially the Feign Death card that you used. So it's a pretty cool archetype. I actually had this deck, and I didn't even attack with it. I literally just sat there. People were like trying to kill my stuff. I'd be like, okay, cool, Feign Death. Or I would sacrifice it, use Feign Death effects. And I literally never attacked. I just drained and gained people to death. It was actually really, really powerful. I kind of took it apart because of that, because it was almost inevitable that you would win the game. So I took it apart. It was too powerful. But if that's your thing, this would be a perfect, cool strategy to go down. This next deck is my Game of Thrones deck. Now, one fun achievement unlocked situation is the Empire artifacts. They are 3 artifacts: Throne of the Empires, Scepter of the Empires, and Crown of the Empires. And the way they work is they do something that's kind of mediocre, but if you have the other 2, it becomes really powerful. Throne of the Empires taps. You tap 1 and tap it, make a 1/1 soldier. But you actually make 5 of those if you have the Scepter or Crown. Scepter taps do damage, 1 damage, but if you have the Crown and Throne, it does 3. Crown of Empires, you pay 3, tap it, tap target creature. Or if the other two are out, you actually permanently gain control of that creature. And that's probably the most powerful one right there. But you could build around all of them. Now, in terms of commander, there's so many good options. I didn't even include one in here. I've seen a Necron, a mono black Necron, where the Necrons are trying to make an empire. That's pretty cool. Padim is a pretty good one because he makes everything have hexproof. All your artifacts have hexproof, so it protects them. And then you could do like Oswald, that one mono white gnome that can sacrifice. It almost is like a birthing pod. And actually, they made a mono blue artifact birthing pod that like cares about artifacts. You sacrifice artifacts and then tutor for one. So there's a lot of cool strategies. And then once you pick out what commander you want, you could do like copy effects that copy activated abilities, or they copy your artifacts so you can have multiple thrones, multiple scepters, multiple crowns. You could also do tap and untap abilities because these are all tap abilities. So the possibilities are pretty much endless with this deck, but it's such a cool achievement unlock. I really like achievement unlock cards. Like you're doing something kind of crazy and you finally get it. That's what Commander kind of is to me. Of course, there's people that play CDAs. There's so many different ways, but I like this kind of janky style of building. For this next deck, we're going to be talking about the bad ETB archetype. It's something I've seen over the years a few times. It's not very common. Now, I had an Esper version, but I took it apart. But something made me want to relook at it, and that's the Sib Sig Ceremony. I have seen this card multiple times, and I'm like, dang, I really want to build around it. It's a 3 mana black legendary enchantment. Creature spells you cast cost 2 colorless less to cast. And whenever a creature you control enters, if it was cast, destroy it, and then you create a 2/2 black zombie druid creature token. Now, bad ETBs. So the bad thing is your things get destroyed. However, if you play Torpor Orb style effects, now Torpor Orb is a 2 mana artifact, creatures entering the battlefield don't cause abilities to trigger. So Torpor Orb will shut off the Sib Sig Ceremony's second ability. So of course you will not get a 2/2 zombie. However, all your creatures will cost 2 less to cast without any downsides. Now, usually back in the day, they had creatures that had huge drawbacks if you want huge power. For example, Leveler is one of the classics. It's a 5 generic artifact creature. When it comes into play, you remove your library from the game and it's a 10/10. So for 5 mana, you are getting a 10/10, but you're losing your whole library. And there's so many cards that deal with this. There's that new one, I forget the name of it, but it has creatures come in with no abilities as skeletons. That would be good. You probably want white in the deck though, because white has the best hate bears that hate on ETB triggers. So that's probably you want to maybe do Orzhov or something like that. Just look up bad ETB cards and then make whatever deck you want. I don't know who the best commander would be. Probably some kind of reanimator so you can keep getting them back. The Sib Sig ceremony is a key part of the Sultai clan's culture in the Tarkir Dragonstorm set, replacing older traditions with zombification. Historically, zombification was a punishment within the Sultai clan. In Tarkir Dragonstorm, however, it has evolved into an honorable ritual for the leaders and artisans, symbolizing a transformation into a new form. This next deck I call Lightning Bolt on a Stick. It's based around Tannuk, Steadfast Second. It is a 4 mana red legendary creature. Other creatures you control have haste, and then artifact cards and red creature cards in your hand have warp for 2 generic and a red, and it's a 3/5. Now, people are building this deck a lot around red dragons, and that's a cool way to go. You could totally do that. However, we want to do what I essentially call lightning bolt on a stick. So creatures that ETB and do damage. Now, the reason why Tannuk is so good is not because the cost reduction, which is that is good. That's not what we want. Warp is a cool ability because you cast it, you get the card, then it gets exiled, and you can cast it again. It's almost like blinking in red. You get to reuse. So, for example, I have a Fanatic of Mogus. I play him for 3 mana. That's great. He's cost 1 less. He does damage equal to devotion to each player. or each opponent. Then he gets exiled, and you can bring him back and do it again. So you get essentially 2-for-1. Now, you could also play creature cost reduction in this deck, making that 3-mana warp only a 1-mana warp, which will really make these essentially lightning bolts. And then if you play something that gives them flash, like Vidalcan Ori, then you're essentially playing very powerful lightning bolts on a stick. If you want to do that achievement unlock situation. This next deck is called Flashing Your Opponent. So basically, this is an off color shift kind of deck where you're trying to do a theme, but in the color that is typically not done. This is Flash, normally done in blue, sometimes black. Like Dimir Fairies is famous for this. But we're actually going to be doing the exact opposite colors, Naya. Annie Flash, the veteran, is the commander. She has Flash naturally, but also when she ETBs, you return a permanent with CMC 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. And then when she attacks, you impulse draw. So Flash is actually a fun ability because you can just draw, maybe attack your opponent during your turn, and then just pass. You don't have to play anything. You become very reactive to your opponents, which can be pretty good in a 4-player game. It turns combat steps into a mess for your. They're not going to want to attack you because they don't know what you're going to flash in. For example, Wind Shaper Plantar is a 4 generic, 1 white angel, as flash flying, and when it enters the battlefield during the declare attacker step, for each each attacking creature, you may reselect which player or planeswalker that creature is attacking. It can't attack its controller and its controller's planeswalkers, of course, and it's a 4/4. So just utility stuff. I mean, there's removals, there's counters in these colors. There's fogs, you name it. There's draw, there's blink. You want to play a lot of blink in this deck because a lot of the flash is ETB. So just play around with it. You'll come up with some amazing things. This deck, I call it the God of Hugs. Now, Tergrid is the God of Fright for a reason in Commander. However, I like rehabilitating CEDH commanders to make them more fun. You saw the VV deck, now we got the Tergrid deck. A lot of people, when they see Tergrid, they do get scared. You have to explain that this deck's not going to be like that. So, what is this deck? Well, it's Tergrid that is a 5-mana black legendary creature god with menace. It says whenever an opponent sacrifices or discards a permanent, you get that onto your battlefield under your control. And she's a 5/4. So we are not going to have a single card in this deck that discards or makes your opponent sacrifice. Sure, they may do it already, and that's great. What we're going to be doing is a group hug deck that makes them draw so many cards that they have to discard the hand size. Now, you can obviously do Howling Mine effects, Peer into the Abyss, which is a 7-mana sorcery that has target player draw half the number of cards in their library, and then they lose half of their life. So they will definitely have to discard unless they have a Reliquary Tower, which, by the way, runs some land destruction in this deck because people play Reliquary Tower a lot. You can do like hand reduction size, like Cursed Rack reduces opponent's hand size to 4. So there's many ways to go about it that don't force your opponent to discard and don't force your opponent to sacrifice anything. Of course, Tergrid has a backside, but we're not going to play the backside because it forces sacrifice. Tergrid, by far, is my favorite character from Kaldheim. Maybe it's because I'm a horror movie fan and I just love the spooky stuff, but she is the Kaldheim god of fright. As a baby, she would speak in tongues, it was unknown language to even the gods. As a 4-year-old, she fought her shadow in a days-long battle, eventually making it succumb to her. Her shadow still tries to kill her sometimes to this day, but they're kind of on friendly terms now. She's Esika's sister. She has a weird speech disorder where she blurts out curses and prophecies at people, usually negative prophecies, making her very socially distant. She doesn't like to talk to people and all that. She's just I wish they had more of her. She seems so cool. This next deck is called my Neverending Torment deck. It's around Villas, Broker of Blood, and is the commander. He's an 8-mana legendary creature demon. As flying, pay a black, pay 2 life, target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. Then whenever you lose life, you draw that many cards. That's the main ability I wanted. It's an 8/8. Now, when I first made this deck, I didn't even have Neverending Torment in there. I actually just had a bunch of sorceries, like 20 to 25 sorceries that say lose life, draw cards. Cruel Bargain's probably one of the most extreme versions of that. It's a 3 black sorcery. Draw 4 cards, you lose half your life rounded up. So it's a pretty huge downside. But if you have Villas out, that means you draw even more cards. So I was drawing so many cards. My hand was so huge that I was like, you know what? I'm actually going to put Never Ending Torment just to see how it does. And it did great. So Never Ending Torment has the Epic ability. Epic came out in Kamigawa. It was actually only on 5 cards, one of each color. It essentially says you can't play anything for the rest of the game. And then at your upkeep, you copy the epic spell except for the epic ability. So, Neverending Torment is a 6 mana sorcery. Search target player's library for X cards, where X is the number of cards in your hand, and then remove them from the game, and then they shuffle. So, basically, your hand size is going to be huge with Villas, and then you're going to be taking chunk after chunk of your opponent's deck. Well, it's actually pretty weak in terms of you can't play anything after playing Neverending Torment. So what do you want to do? You want to set up your board so you have copy abilities like Strionic Resonator, Twinning Staff doubles how many times you copy, and then you want to play abilities that are land, like on your lands, you can make them man lands. You can play cycling abilities, stuff like that, so you can still play the game. However, you just have that powerful epic ability. Hopefully, you just exile all the important cards in each player's library, and you just swing in for Velas, killing them.
This next deck is more of a concept than actual deck list I have for you. It's around a Super Friends deck. Planeswalkers have the most lore behind them and the most cards related to them. Whether it's the name, the art, the flavor text, or some kind of connection to the story, you can build a deck with a vast majority of cards included in there. Now, you can actually find specific art, flavor text, or names in Scryfall. You go to advanced search and you put in whatever you want. For example, you could put in Liliana. There's over 100 cards referencing Liliana. You could put in Chandra, who I think has like the most Planeswalker card. It's like almost 20 now. You can do a Jace. I have a Jace Phyrexian deck because I had a Jace deck and then he became a Phyrexian, so I switched it over. So it had a whole bunch of, Infect and Phyrexian references. And then they switched them back in the lore. And I was like, what the heck? But you can also do Bolas. I've seen people do Bolas with all the Amonkhet invocations, if that's something you are interested in. Now, it's a fun, creative, and unique way to build a Super Friends deck. Super Friends can sometimes be stale. Everyone builds them in so many ways. I'm actually going to have a Planeswalker video where I come up with the most unique Planeswalker style decks.
Now, let me paint a picture for you here. This deck is called the Red Rash deck, okay? And what I am doing here is playing Red Infect. Urabrask the Hidden is a 5 mana red legendary creature. Creatures your opponents control come in tapped, and creatures you control have haste, and he's a 4/4. Now, I will say I love Urabrask as a character. He was always a chill dude. While everyone was trying to convert people to be a Phyrexian, he was just like, you know what? If they want to join us, they join us. We'll try to convince them, but if not, let them be. I love that. We're not going to let our opponents be, though, of course. We're going to give them a red rash with Infect. We're going to infect our opponent. There are a fair amount, probably 15 to 20 creatures with Infect, and you don't need a lot of them. Then you could do one of two things. One, you can boost them with something like Moldavian Rage, kind of like how they would in Modern Infect, just instant speed boosting. Don't, or you can do like the equipment boosting if you want, but they can see that coming. You want them to not know the threat that's happening. So Moldavian Rage is an X red instant. Target attacking creature gets +X/+0 until end of turn, and then you draw a card at the beginning of your next turn's upkeep. So it boosts and replaces itself. Or you can play cards that have them deal non-combat damage, like Chandra's Ignition, which has the creature deal damage equal to its power to each creature and each player. That also would trigger Infect. It doesn't have to be combat damage for Infect to work. Just keep that in mind. Fallen Ferromancer is a good example of that. You can pay 2, tap it, and it'll deal 1 damage to target creature or player. And it's a 1/1. Remember, if an Infect creature does damage to a creature, it does it in the form of neg 1 counter. So it actually makes things smaller. So it's a pretty powerful ability. Now, Urbrask let the Mirren survivors to take refuge in the furnace layer of the plane, which he controlled. This was because he aligned with the color of emotion and freedom, granting him enough empathy not to destroy them. Now, this, coupled with his sheer dislike of the other factions, led him to steal the furnace layer and seal it up, and didn't allow any other Phyrexian factions to get involved with it. Now, for the most part, they didn't seem to care either way, although the Blue Aligned Progress engine was paranoid about him sealing himself away. But that's one reason I love Urbask. Yeah, he's spreading the Phyrexian plague. However, he's doing it to only those that are willing. He's not killing unnecessarily, and he hates all the overreaching factions. I would totally be on Red Phyrexian's team.
This next deck is called Throw the Book at 'em. It's actually a flavor based deck around Book Tribal. You play artifacts that are books, like Heirloom Epic. It's a 1 mana artifact. You pay for, tap it, draw a card, and then you can reduce that 4 by tapping a creature. This is a good strategy because usually you want draw engines in your deck, and most books draw you cards because books equal knowledge. And in Magic, gaining knowledge means drawing cards. That's why discard spells usually make you go crazy or something. Same thing with Mill. Now, bonus in this deck, if you use non artifact cards that have book in the art, again, you can go to Scryfall, go to the advanced settings for their search, go to art and just put book. There's tomes, there's maps, there's scrolls. You just pick whatever reading material you want. And then as a commander, Katsumasa, the animator, was my first choice. He's a 4 mana legendary creature, Moonfolk Artificer, has flying, and then you pay 3 to make a artifact you control, a non-creature artifact, a creature with base power 1/1, and it gains flying. Then at the beginning of your upkeep, put a +1/+1 counter on each up to 3 target non-creature artifacts. It's a 3/3. So it's boosting your books even if they're not a creature, and then you can animate one of them to throw them at your opponent. Then you got something that got spoiled recently, Doc Ock, Evil Inventor. He's a 7 mana Dimir legendary creature, human scientist villain. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target non-creature artifact you control becomes an 8/8 robot villain artifact creature in addition to its other types, and it's an 8/8. So unlike Katsumasa, Doc Ock actually turns them into creatures permanently. It's not temporarily. Now, you can also have stuff like Rise and Shine that turns all artifacts you control into creatures. So you can essentially animate them and throw them at your opponent. It's a really flavorful deck that makes you be creative with your card choices.
Now, Katsuma, also known as Katori, is a Soratami artificer from the plane of Kamigawa, who is in the league with the Futurists. Now, the Futurists believe that the only way to advance in the world is through technology, and that people should give up the old for the new. Now, he's friends with the Planeswalker Kato. He designed an origami crane drone. His parents were killed in a factory due to a toxic spill, which sucks because if they were in the Marvel Universe set, they would get superpowers. He also wears a telepathic implant in his head. He invented technology that incorporated Kami into it. He's one of the first to do that. He's an innovator. This next deck is called my Polymorphs Jest deck, based around transmutation spells. If you aren't aware, in Magic the Gathering, transmutation is a type of magic that transforms one living thing into another. That's 7/7 Nicol Bolas in the War of the Spark, just beat in face. Okay, it is a 1/1 now with no abilities. That's a super powerful kind of magic. How are we going to play that in a deck? Well, you got Reprobation. It turns Enchanted Creature into a 0/1 creature that is a coward with no other abilities. That's amazing. Blight Steel, boom, it's a 0/1 coward. What are they gonna what are they gonna do other than cry? And there are a dozens of effects like this in Azorius or Bant, depending on where you want to go with it. Frogify turns them into 1/1s. You got some that turn them into walls with defenders, some that turn them into treasures, some that turn them into clues, and the list just goes on. You can use Heliod as the commander. His transform side gives your spells flash, which is great because essentially your auras become generous gifts. You get rid of something and replace it with something else. Not exactly, but you get what I'm saying here. Also, Heliod smiting people he finds weak and that dare to challenge him just seems like perfect flavor. This next deck is called From Farm to Table. Now, Liberated Livestock is another card I just fell in love with when I saw it. Its art and its flavor is so cool. It is a cat, bird, and ox. It's a 6 mana white creature. It says when it dies, you create a 1/1 white cat creature token with lifelink. You create a 1/1 white bird with flying, and then you create a 2/4 ox. Now, for each of those tokens, you put an aura card from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield attached to that token, and it's a 4/6. So, in the past, I've talked about Feign Death, I even talked about it earlier. It is instants that return creatures that die. There's also a bunch of auras that do this, like Unholy Indenture. You play this on Liberated Livestock, sacrifice it, make the tokens, and then return it. It also returns the auras. Then you move them back onto Liberated Livestock. Arden is one of the commanders for it, so he naturally moves auras around. Now, this is like an Aura Aristocrat deck, which you don't really see a lot because why would you put a bunch of auras on something if you're going to sacrifice it? That seems like a waste of time and effort. But this deck, it wants to do that. It plays a lot of auras that say when this creature dies, do XYZ. You're going to be getting them back. You could also go the route where you just have expensive auras that you want to put from your hand into play. But really getting that liberated livestock back multiple times, sacrificing it, getting it back, sacrificing it. It's just a really fun thing to do. You make a whole farm of animals and then swing out for game. Maybe do some token doublers, some overrun effects, and stuff like that. This next deck is my Unholy Matrimony deck, themed around making non legendary creatures legendary. We are doing this with the ring, hence the matrimony part of the name. The ring's first ability states your ring bearer is legendary and can't be blocked by creatures with greater power. Okay, so we did that. Then what? What do we benefit from making one creature legendary? Well, a good commander is Rada Drabix of Orborg. It's an 4 mana Orzhov legendary creature, zombie wizard. Has vigilance, ward 2. Other zombies you control have vigilance. Then, whenever another legendary creature you control dies, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's not legendary and is a 2/2 black zombie in addition to its other types. And it's a 3/3. So, there's almost going to be like a zombie sub theme, hence the unholy part of the name. Now, it doesn't say specifically non-token legendary. So you can make that token that you create, the ring bearer, for example. Let's say you have a creature that says when this enters the battlefield, the ring tempts you. You can make that creature your ring bearer, then sacrifice it, have a token come in as a copy, make that token the ring bearer, and just keep going for infinite death triggers or infinite whatever triggers you want. Now, if infinite isn't your thing, you can just choose great value ETB creatures to copy. You can play stuff like destroy all non-legendary type cards. Orzhov has a lot of good legendary sub-theme cards you can put in this deck. There's definitely room to grow with this strategy and to play around with it. I haven't really perfected it yet, so if you have any ideas and you like this idea, go run with it. The great Radadrabic has outlived almighty liches on Dominaria. He has seen apocalypses come and go from the ramshackle castle in the marshes of Orborg. He survived would-be heroes, the Phyrexian invasion, the collapse of time itself. Now, if you guys didn't know this, Orborg used to be green aligned. It used to be a forest, but then the Brothers War happened, and then the Silex Blast destroyed it, turning it into a marshy swamp. Now, there are no remaining necromancers of his caliber on Dominaria. If he had his way, he'd be the last great power in Orborg. This next deck is called the Graveyard Munchies. It's based around, and you can actually do multiple characters for this theme. You could do the new Venom if you love Marvel, or it can do Jared Golgari Lynchlord. Now, the whole theme of the deck is to play as many of those star power toughness equal to something in your graveyard effects. Lord of Extinction is the best one. It's a 5-mana Golgari creature elemental. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in all graveyards. And there are a lot of cards just like that. Well, not just like that. That is the best one. Most of them care about the creatures in your graveyard. Some care about the creatures in everyone's graveyard. So what are we doing with this? So, Venom, Deadly Devour, is a 4-mana Golgari legendary creature, symbiote villain, vigilance, and menace. And then you pay 3 to exile a creature from any graveyard and put X +1/+1 counters on target symbiote, where X is the toughness of the card exiled, and it's a 4/4. So, of course, when Lord of Extinction is in the graveyard or in exile, you still calculate his power. His power is not 0/0. His power is still calculated by his effect. And similar with Jared Golgari Lynchlord, he's a 4-mana Golgari legendary creature, zombie elf. His He gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard. Then you can pay 3, sacrifice another creature. Each opponent loses life equal to the sacrificed creature's power. Sacrifice a swamp and a forest to return him from your graveyard to your hand. He's a 2/2. So basically, you can sacrifice Lord of Extinction later on the game, and you'll probably kill everyone. Or you can use Venom's ability to boost him to exile Lord of Extinction or some other similar card, and bang, bada boom, you're hitting with Voltron. You're going to want to do a lot of self mill. Essentially, you want everything to be a creature version of your deck. You don't want any non creatures if you can help it. Of course, sometimes you can't. I think I built the version of this deck that had like 50 something creatures in it. That way, every time I mill, I'm milling some creatures. And you want your dredge, you want stuff like that to just fill your graveyard. This next one is really silly. I call it No, I'm Patrick, my deck. The regenerate is something in Magic the Gathering that they moved away from. But when you regenerate something, it means it's not destroyed, it gets tapped and removed from combat, remove all damage that's on it. So one day I was looking through my cards and I saw Spiny Starfish, hence the Patrick. He is a 3-mana blue creature, Starfish. You pay 1 to regenerate him. And at the beginning of your end step, if he was regenerated, you make a 0/1 blue starfish creature token for each time it was regenerated, and he's a 0/1. So you're making kind of weak tokens with that ability. So what are we going to do? We're going to be playing a lot of pingers that ping it. We're going to be playing lure effects that force block. There's a lot of cool things that you can do with it. For commanders, it's kind of an open book, really. You could do Ragnar. He's a 3-mana Bant legendary creature from Legends, which I'm about to do a lore video on the Legends set. You pay a Bant colors, tap them to regenerate a creature. You can do a whole regeneration theme with this deck, and there's a lot of cool ways to go about it. Some benefits of this is it's going to be very resilient against removal. Cards don't say it can't regenerate anymore. Wrath of God was one of the originals, but nowadays regenerate's not being used, so they don't actually use that a lot of the time anymore. And I just love the flavor of it. I don't know if you know this about starfish, but if you cut them in half, it'll actually just make 2 starfish. I don't know if this is a certain species of starfish, but it just seems pretty cool. You damage my spiny starfish, it regenerates itself, making another one. And then you use like overrun effects with it. There's preposterous proportions that give all creatures you control +10/+10 in vigilance. There's just so many cool options with this deck.
This next deck is actually built around King Makar. I call it my King Midas deck. Now, King Makar, the Gold Cursed, is a 4-mana legendary creature human. He has the Inspired ability, which is a really cool ability. Whenever he untaps, you may exile target creature. And if you do, put a colorless artifact token named Gold onto the battlefield. Golds are essentially the treasures before treasures were a thing. So there's not a lot of synergies with golds like there are treasures. Now, I don't know if you know this, but King Midas was in mythology. Everything he touched turned to gold. That's what it's kind of doing here. And I just love the art. He obviously pet his cat there and turned it to gold. So, what are we doing with this deck? Basically, I actually saw someone play this. I'm in a Discord group and they were playing a King Makar vehicle deck. So basically, they would use the king to crew their vehicle and then have multiple ways to untap him. And they were controlling the board like crazy. Like you were afraid to play a card because he would just touch it, turn it to gold. And as they're removing everything, they're essentially mana ramping. So it's a really powerful thing. Now, you can actually go, I don't know, if you want to go Dimir inspired, every color has inspired. It was kind of the theme of the first Theros block. I think it was Born of the Gods was the set that had the most in it. You could do Dimir if you wanted. You got Aidwall. He was a breaker of chains. He was actually an assassin Creed card. He's a legendary creature, human assassin pirate. When he enters the battlefield, you reveal the top 6 cards of your library. You put an assassin, pirate, or vehicle card from among them into your hand and the rest on the bottom in a random order. Then, whenever a vehicle you control deals combat damage to a player, you may return him from the graveyard to your hand. He's a 4/1. So he's a 4/1, so he can crew a vehicle pretty well. And he gets vehicles from the top of your library. So there's a many ways you can go about it. But I think the King Makar, so it's a mono black vehicle deck. When's the last time you saw this guy on the field? And I just want to make as much gold as possible. I think that's just an achievement unlock situation. They really need to print cards that care about gold, kind of like they do treasure.
This next deck I called the Life Gift. Now, some decks are just so simple but so pure that they're so much fun. Titania Voice of Gaia is one such commander in my book that's just is pretty straightforward. However, you never see it played. Also, you can build around it a bit. Okay, so it's a 3 mana green legendary creature elemental. It has reach, and whenever one or more land cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, you gain 2 life. And then it melds with a card called Argoth into Titania Gaia Incarnate. Now, it's a legendary creature elemental avatar, as vigilance, reach, trample, and haste. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control. And then when it enters the battlefield, return all lands from your graveyard to onto the battlefield tapped. And then you can pay 4 mana to put 4+1/+1 counters on a land, and it becomes a 0/0 elemental. Now, this deck, you want to be sacrificing your lands, getting them into the graveyard, and then bringing them all back with stuff like Splendid Reclamation or Titania Gaia Incarnate. And then also, for fun, there's a lot of cards, and they're never played because they're kind of viewed as weak. They're almost like Soul Sisters, but for lands, like Life Gift. It's a 3 mana green enchantment. Whenever a land comes into play, you gain a life. That's any land from any player, you just gain a life. How simple, how beautiful. No one's going to suspect this deck is going to gain insane amounts of life and then beat face with your commander. So I really want to, I'm actually going to be building this deck. I love it so much. I also built it for the purposes of a lore video. I build decks around lore. I do a deep dive on the lore video, and then bang bada boom, the next week I come up with 3 to 5 decks based around the lore. So if you like things like that, check those out. This next deck is actually also inspired by the lore. Urza was in something called the Brothers War. Like I said, I have a whole video about it. Go check it out if you like. I actually did like a military analysis where I go over their weaponry, their battle tactics, the various battles, and all that stuff. So, and the geopolitical climate of the time. It's almost like a history documentary if you like that kind of thing. So, Urza made a series of factories, power plants, mines, towers to build a war machine. So, in this deck, that's what we'll be doing. We have about 20 artifacts that produce tokens, and they produce artifact tokens, but not always. Thopter Shop can do this. It makes a 1/1 Thopter token with flying. And then we also have our commander here, Urza, Prince of Krug. It's an Azorius 4-mana legendary creature, human artificer. It gives artifacts creatures you control +2/+2. And then you can pay 6, create a token that's a copy of target artifact you control, except it's a 1/1 soldier creature in addition to its other types, and it's a 2/3. So it's going to be pretty good. You also may want to focus on the Urza lands, getting out like Urza Tower, Urza Mine, Urza Power Plant. So paying that 6 mana cost will be nothing. And then you're going to want to just tap your factory kind of things, make tokens. And then if your opponent board wipes, I mean, it'll set you back a little, but you'll just keep tapping you'll keep producing your war machines and hopefully overwhelm your opponent. This next deck is more of a concept style of deck based around Universe Beyond. Now, one thing I did, I actually made a Warhammer deck with only Warhammer cards. I used Archeon the Ever Chosen, which is one of the Secret Lair Warhammer cards. It gave me 5 colors essentially. That's why I played it. You can also do Warrior of Light. I made a viewer, he requested an Oops All Final Fantasy deck. So I made a Warrior of Light for him. It was essentially a legendary equipment tribal because, Warrior of Light is Joda, the Unifier. He only cares about legendary spells. He doesn't care about legendary creatures for his second ability there. And I mean, there's Lord of the Rings, Fallout, Marvel, Avatar. The list goes on. You can easily do that. And you could do it in universe as well if you wanted. You could do only Innistrad cards, only Ravnica cards. Whatever you want to do, you can take and just run with it. Now, what are the benefits of this kind of deck? It's flavorful, which is pretty cool. It piques your interest because you have a specific interest in those things. And it'll usually be a casual deck because you have a very limited pool of cards. So it'll be pretty casual and hopefully relatively budget. For example, the Fallout decks are only in the Fallout deck. So you can just buy those and bang, bada, boom. Same thing with Warhammer. They actually didn't have a set. You know, Final Fantasy might be more expensive, so might Spider-Man and so on. But in a lot of these decks actually come with full foil, so you can actually make a full foil flavorful deck. That's a mouthful just to say. But I like this strategy. I think it's pretty cool. And if it gets people playing what they love, I'm all for it.
This next deck actually started as a lore based deck around Mishra from my Brothers War lore video. Now, it was based around Mishra's factory. It is a land that taps for colorless, and you can pay 1 to make it a 2/2 assembly worker. That's also an artifact. And then you can tap it to boost another assembly worker. The whole theme of the deck revolved around copying lands and artifacts so you can get as many factories as possible. You could also play assembly worker cards like the card assembly worker, which is kind of funny. It's like if a vampire creature was called vampire. It's like get a little more creative with the names, Wizards of the Coast. But assembly worker is a 3 mana artifact creature assembly worker. You tap them, target assembly worker gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Now, I thought a really good commander for this, and I believe Doodle actually came up with the idea for the commander is Misform Ultimatus. It's a 4 mana blue legendary creature. Its ability says it has every creature type, and this is of course the precursor to the changeling ability that you'll see later on in Lorwyn. And this is I think it was Time Shift. I can't Time Spiral. That's I think what this card was from. Now he's technically an assembly worker, so you fill your deck with a lot of assembly worker cards. You assembly workers also, by the way, are really good at self-replicating. You got like Mishra's assembly worker that every time you play an artifact, it makes a copy of itself. There's assembly workers that tutor for creatures from your deck, specifically other assembly workers. So it's pretty cool. I love the idea of this deck and getting as many Mishra's factories on the battlefield and tapping them to boost your Mistform Ultimatus just seems like a lot of fun.
You probably know Urza and Mishra made a whole mess of the continent of Tertiaire and all of Dominaria. But did you know that their machines survived over the last millennia? Assembly workers still work factories long forgotten, producing nothing, doing menial tasks mindlessly. Juggernauts of Urza, long buried, return to life once they're disturbed from their burial site. Artificers attempt to replicate the machinery of the past, but they can't. They just don't know the secrets. It almost reminds me of Roman like cement. We can't replicate some of the stuff the Romans did, even with all this advanced technology. I kind of think of it like that. This next one is called Noctis's Bake Sale. It's a food and clue deck. However, it's not the token kind. They're physical cards that are clues and foods. Noctis is a 4 mana Esper creature, legendary creature, has lifelink, and he says you can cast artifacts from your graveyard by paying an additional 3 life, and they enter with a finality counter. That means if it would leave the battlefield, it gets exiled instead. Now, we're going to want to reuse a lot of our foods, so Power Conduit or effects like it will be using a lot. There's actually a lot in blue, surprisingly enough. What we'll also be doing is sacrificing our artifacts, which will normally be foods. Sir Ginger, the Meal Ender, is a 2 mana legendary artifact creature, Food Knight. So food is also, I guess, like it could be a creature or some kind of artifact. There's also a lot of clues that do that. There's even some lands that are clues now, thanks to the clue set. There's actually a set of lands, one of each 2 color pairing. So you can even play those. I think there's over 30 cards total that you can play in here. And they sacrifice themselves usually, like Sir Ginger. You can pay 2 tapper, sacrifice, or gain life equal to her power. So they sacrifice themselves and gain life, which will minimize that paying 3 life. Also, your commander has lifelink, so it'll minimize that. So it's a fun aristocrat artifact style kind of deck. You sacrifice your foods, you bring them back, you sacrifice them, you reheat them, you eat them, you reheat them. I guess I should have called it Noctis's Leftovers. Either name fits.
This next deck is based around Spike Tribal. I call this deck I'm a Spike player, obviously a play on words. Now, Professor Hojo was the commander. When he was spoiled, I was like, what can we do with him? I really wanted to do something with lands because he actually reduces any activated ability, not just of creatures. Now, he is a 2 mana green legendary creature, human scientist. The first activated ability you activate during your turn that targets a creature you control is 2 generic less to activate. Then, whenever one or more creatures you control become the target of an activated ability, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn, and he's a 2/2. So, the way it works with spikes is spikes come in with +1/+1 counters. So, they're usually 0/0s, but they get the counters on them when they ETB. And then it has 2 abilities typically. The first one is usually 2 mana. You remove a counter from it, put a +1/+1 counter on another creature. And then usually it has a card specific last ability. For example, Spike Weaver has the ability you pay 1, remove a +1/+1 counter from Spike Weaver. Creatures deal no combat damage this turn. Now, this is an amazing ability. You know how much I like fogs, but we are going to reduce the cost and target things all the time. We're going to be drawing like crazy. We don't need to hold up mana on our turn because it's reduced by 2. So any of the abilities are free. And then during your opponent's turn, you want to activate a moving counters around. And as you move counters around, you want counter doublers. So like hardened scales. So you remove one from Spike Weaver to give another one 2. And then remove one from that to give another 2. And they'll just keep adding up.
If you don't know, spikes are a creature type first found in Tempest block. They were likely created or modified for their purpose in Fulwrath's operating theater in the Strongholds of Wrath. Spikes are depicted with a slug like body with 2 rows of pods down either side or back and a pair of pincers on their face. They're really creepy looking. So, Professor Hojo, I feel like since they were created in a lab, it kind of just fits the theme. Now, this next deck is also a meme deck. And what I mean by that, it was literally made from a meme. I saw that when Garnet, the Princess of Alexandria, was revealed. She is a 2 mana Selesnya legendary creature. She has lifelink, and when she attacks, you may remove a lore counter from each to any number of sagas you control. Put a +1/+1 counter on her for each lore counter removed this way, and she's a 2/2. So the meme had her in the center, and then it had multiple sagas that exile things. For example, you got Summon Yojimbo. It's a 4-mana saga creature. The first ability says exile target artifact, enchantment, or tapped creature an opponent controls. And there's a bunch, like 15 to 20 of them that do this for some reason. Usually it's kind of temporary and almost like an O-ring effect till they leave the field. However, let me just set up the board state for you. You got your Garnet, you played her last turn, you play Summon Yojimbo, you exile something from your opponent. Then you attack with Garnet, removing the counter, so it has 0 counters on it. And then next turn, it'll put another counter on it, activating that first ability, exile another. Then you attack with Garnet again, removing it. Next turn, exile another. And you just keep going that way. It's kind of a brutal deck if you can get the actions going. You always won't be, of course. However, it's just the whole meme was saying how brutal this deck is. Honestly, I don't think it's that brutal. It's like a Voltron kind of strategy with some exile, remove the creatures out of your path from if they're going to block. I think it's a good strategy. I don't think it's as brutal as the meme said, but if you want to live the meme dream, bang bada boom.
This next deck is called Slime Time, based around slime against humanity. And on an off note, I just had a random thought come into my head. Are you guys familiar with Nickelodeon and how they used to just slime people? I always wanted to be slime like that. I don't know why. Anyway, so it's not really about slime against humanity. This deck's more about a rules interaction with replacement effects. So, Slime Against Humanity is a 3-mana green sorcery. You create a 0/0 green ooze creature token with trample. You put X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is 2 plus the total number of cards you own in exile and in your graveyard that are oozes or named Slime Against Humanity. A deck can have as many number of Slime Against Humanities as possible. I do love the pun Crime Against Humanity, so I love it. Anyway, so in Final Fantasy, they came out with someone named Qina Q Gourmet. He's a 3-mana legendary creature. If one or more tokens would be created under your control, those tokens plus a 1/1 green frog creature token are created instead. Then you can pay 2, sacrifice a frog, put a +1/+1 counter on him, and he's a 2/3. Now, that replacement effect, how it works. If you use Slime Against Humanity, make a token, it gets counters on it. But the replacement effect also makes a frog in addition to that. Now that frog will also get those +1/+1 counters. That is pretty important. So you can make big oozes and big frogs, which allows you to play essentially a dual tribal deck. You can play Ooze Tribal plus Frog Tribal. In mono green, not a huge lot of options for the Frog Tribal, but it's still pretty cool. And if that's not your thing, you want to add a few colors just so you can play around with some stuff. You got Ginny Fate, Jetmir second. It's a 3-mana Naya legendary creature. If you create one or more tokens, you instead create that many 2/2 green cat creature tokens with haste, or that many 3/1 green dog creature tokens with vigilance. It's a 3/3. So you would make, instead of an ooze, you would actually make a 2/2 or 3/1 token and then put that many +1/+1 counters on it. So you're not making 2 tokens, but still. And there, I know there was a Lord of the Rings card that would make food tokens it with whatever else you're making, and those two would get counters on it. But I'm not sure how you could animate in green or how to do that, but you can play around with that idea as well. Now, Jenny is a pretty interesting character. She actually was an orphan on New Capenna, and then she caught the eye of Jetmir, who actually leads a criminal organization that is associated with Naya colors. He brought her in as a guard after seeing how good she was with fighting in the blade. She endeared herself to the old Leonin, who looked at her like a daughter that he never had. She's deadly beautiful and has a deep love for life's finery. Ginny now lives as the heir apparent to the Cabaretti, which the Cabaretti is the organization associated with Naya Colors. That's a criminal organization. She has 2 familiars, a cat named Murray and a dog named Ragus.
Now, this next deck is a 2-for-1 kind of situation, depending on what your play group enjoys. It's based around Rabia lore. Now, Rabia was a plane that I talked about, have a video, shout out to myself. Go check that video out if you like the lore of Magic the Gathering. It's based around Rabia, which is essentially an Arabian Night style theme. It has Jinn where you make wishes. So there's two ways you can go about this. You can rule 0 with your friend group to play wishes. Now, wishes normally don't do anything in EDH because they get stuff from your sideboard and you don't have a sideboard in EDH. But you can talk with your friends and be like, hey, are you cool if I have a 15 card sideboard for my EDH deck just so I can use wishes? You know, you don't have to technically do infinite combo pieces. You can just put some ramp in there, put some removal, just useful stuff. Or you can go the Djinn of Wishes route. And that is technically not a wish. It you pay for to exile the top card of your library and you can cast it for free. He comes in with 3 wish counters. He's a blue 5 mana Djinn with flying, and he's a 4/4. So he could be like a secret commander kind of deal. Or you can combine the wishes with Djinn Tribal, combine the two. You can even go 5 color because there's all kinds of colors for Djinn. Or if you want, for your commander, if you just want to focus on Djinn of Wishes and not like a Djinn tribal theme, you can go Dinehair Invoker Adept. Or is it Dynahair Invoker Adept? It's a 4 mana Jeskai legendary creature, human wizard, has haste, and you may activate abilities of other creatures you control as though they had haste. And then you can tap her when the next activated ability this turn spends 4 more mana to activate it, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. It's a 4/4. So Jenna Wish's ability is 4 mana. You tap her, copy it, bang, bada, boom. You get 2 activated abilities. However, it only removes 1 wish because that's part of the cost. That's not part of the ability. So you get up to 6 wishes. You're gonna want to play stuff like proliferate stuff. Put more counters on Jenna Wishes. Maybe copy them and move counters around, so forth. You can do so many cool things, and you can just cheat your omniscience off the top of your deck or big haymakers off the top of the deck. Whatever you guys think. But I just think it's such a cool it's such cool flavor. A Jin Wish deck that just sounds so cool. Now, if you didn't know, like I said, obviously Rabia was ruled by Jin. There was actually a major civil war with honestly an unknown cause that took place that forced both sides, a good side and a bad side of the Jin. Now, each faction took a side. Eventually, they weaken themselves. Some actually move to other worlds, which I talk about in the video. But eventually, King Solomon enslaves a whole bunch of Jinn. I think it was like 84 Jinn in various items. He'd attach them to an item like a lamp, a bottle, a Kit Kat wrapper, whatever, whatever. He'd enslave them, attach them that. So if you rub it, a genie pops out, grants you some wishes. Not always 3 wishes, though. That's not how the story kind of went. The story's kind of weird. Now, they even shudder at the King Solomon's name or any symbol that represents him because they're still in fear of him. Urza lands are a fun theme for a deck. If you don't know, Urza's Tower, Mine, and Power Plant have the subtype Urza. When on the field together, they tap for 7 mana total. This is used in Modern to make like Karn Liberated, for example, on a turn 3, which is pretty huge. In EDH, we have access to 7 types of Urza lands, actually. Urza's Workshop, for example, adds mana equal to the number of Urza lands we control, and none of these lands are legendary, so you can actually copy them multiple times. The commander you can use almost any commander you want. I would definitely put green in here so you can search out non-basic lands pretty easy. One perk to having Urza lands is something like the March from Vale's Veil. It turns all your Urza lands into a creature, and it says target creature you control. So if you have a really good creature out there, you can turn all your Urza lands into it and swing in for game. There's a lot of cool shenanigans you can play. You can copy them. You obviously want to search for them. You can animate them. You do whatever you want. It's just really cool to get Urzatron online in EDH. It's like an achievement unlock situation. This next one is more of a concept, and it's a fun, flavorful way to build. It's retro border frames. In my alpha lore video, I built a retro goblin deck around Krinko Mob Boss. Yeah, Krinko Mabas has a retro frame. They actually have printed a lot of newer cards in retro frame, so you have a lot of options actually. It's pretty popular now. Now, Krinko obviously is one of the most CEDH goblin commanders you can have. But in this version, I mean, he's good, but he's not CEDH worthy because retro also limits you, and that's a fun way to build because you'll play cards you normally wouldn't. Goblin King is from Alpha. It's one of the things that made me want to do this. So you have a lot of cool goblins you can put in this. You can go 5 color or all the way down to monocolor. So I have a friend that plays mono red retro frame, but it's an artifact deck. He calls it his brown deck because artifacts used to be very brown, not very gray. So you can have fun with this. It's really cool. Krinko is an independent goblin mob boss with a faintly nasally voice. He makes a living doing job requests as a mercenary for businessmen, usually undercover, hidden, in questionably legal operations. Most of the proceeds he earns goes back into his group, showing surprising compassion for the plight of his fellow goblin, so long as he gets his cut first, of course. Though Krinko shows a great deal of savvy for planning, at his heart he is a goblin of action like most goblins are. Another deck I did for Alpha Lore was based around the Forbidden card Black Lotus. Unfortunately, the Magic Gods hate us and we can't actually play it in EDH. It's banned. Probably is good that it's banned. I don't know. I don't know. But we're going to be playing it either way. How are we playing it? Garth One Eye. He taps to cast a Black Lotus. And of course, it's 0, so you don't have to pay for it. He also taps to cast Disenchant, Brain Geyser, Terror, Shivan Dragon, Regrowth. So he has Removal and Disenchant and Terror. He has Recursion with Regrowth. He has Draw Power with Mana Geyser. And then he can beat face with Shivan Dragon. So you're going to be tapping him, untapping him, blinking him, copying him as a non-legendary, and all the while tap. First thing you're gonna do, tap him Black Lotus, and then you're gonna save up your Black Lotus. You're gonna do token doublers. You're gonna do all the things you can, and then sacrifice them all to a Shivan Dragon. Yes, Shivan Dragon is one of the most popular. They've unfortunately reprinted this guy to the ground. Not that he's would be expensive either way, because he's kind of just a generic. He'd be an uncommon now. But he has the fire breathing ability, which we can pump all the mana into to increase his power into swinging for game. And we hopefully make an army of the Shivan Dragons as well. Because once we're done tapping it for Black Lotus, we might as well tap it for a Shivan Dragon. This next deck is the Dreadmaw Dream. Now, Colossal Dreadmaw has probably been one of the most memed on cards recently. This is because they printed it in like 3 sets in a row. It was kind of crazy. And now with the new Spider-Man release, there is a Spider-Man dinosaur that is a Dreadmaw technically. And so Dreadmaw is a term used in Magic, meaning it's a 6 mana creature with power and toughness 6/6. This is just a meme deck, but it can become viable with its secret commander, Wild Pair, which lets you tutor into play a creature from your library with the same total power and toughness of a creature that you played from your hand. So you get 2 Dreadmaws for 6 mana instead of 1. That's pretty good. You can pick any number, really. Okay, so if you wanted to make a deck where everyone's power and toughness equal 5 or 4 or 7, you could do 7 and then call that like 7 is wild or something like that. There's so many options for this meme dream. Now, wild pair is interesting because it's totaling up the power and toughness. So Dreadmaw would be 6 plus 6, and that would be 12. So you have to look for something with total power and toughness that equals up to 12. So you could do a 5/7, a 4/8, and so on. So you got some options here to play around with this meme.
Thank you so much for watching until the end of the video. Most of the time, I think only 10% or less do so, so you're a champ. Comment down below if you made it and which deck was your favorite. Are you building any of these decks? Do you have a unique deck idea I didn't mention that you think should be mentioned in a future video? Comment it all down below. I would love to hear it. I actually make viewer requested videos. I get a few at a time and then I'll make a video based around it. Follow me on Ladman EDH on YouTube, where I make weekly videos about EDH deck building and Magic the Gathering lore.